like I had no fear of anything, of going any place. I really didn't. And this was my life story. Is like I remain fearless now because of these things, of having this strength of whatever it was, that a strength that was given to me in my upbringing. This is such important for young people to hear this. You know, when you're choosing your partner in life, how you raise your children, it's about moving the generation, moving the moving the family forward, moving the bloodline forward, doing things that are positive and moving yourself in a forward way, not down, not backwards, but forward and upward, always.
Yeah, agreed. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dream Leapers. I'm your host, Harriette Cole, and we have a very special guest today. We have just enjoyed New York Bridal Week. Now, you've heard about New York Fashion Week that gets talked about everywhere. When New York Bridal Week is when bridal designers showcase all of their new designs so that everyone in the industry can come and see, and then brides get to come and shop in the next season. So let me tell you about who we have today. We're closing out Bridal Week with one of the most trusted names in bridal fashion, a visionary who has helped countless women step into one of the most memorable moments of their lives with confidence, grace, and impeccable style. Mark Ingram is the founder and creative force behind the legendary eponymous Mark Ingram Atelier, a home for sophistication, luxury, and timeless design. A graduate of NYU and a veteran of luxury retail, Mark began his career at unparalleled Fifth Avenue stores. You've heard of them, I bet, Bonwit Teller and, what's still here, Bergdorf Goodman, before he served as the National Bridal Sales Director at Amsala. In 2002, he opened his own atelier, where he eventually launched his own collection, Mark Ingram Bride, which is known for its effortless elegance and refined modernity. His work has been celebrated by major publications, including Vogue, Brides, Harper's Bazaar, and the New York Times. So today we're going to be speaking with Mark about the power of fashion to tell stories, the artistry behind creating a once-in-a-lifetime look, and how he built a brand that continues to inspire brides and dreamers everywhere. Please join me in welcoming the incomparable Mark Ingram.
Thank you, Harriet. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction.
Well, and I was just thinking back, like, how long have we known each other? So it's Amsala.
I'm going to tell you exactly.
Oh,
we
please.
were both on the Colin Cowie Everyday Lifestyle TV show at the Aquaba Mansion in Brooklyn. And I was brought on the show. It was a Southern cooking segment. I was cooking the dinner based on my mom's Charleston recipes.
Oh my, I remember that. I did
Yes.
not recall that was why, but that's even better. I remember Colin Cowie, and that was so much fun. And Aquaba Mansion is Monique Greenwood, who I went to college with.
Yes.
And at that time, I think that was when she had one Aquaba Mansion, and now there are quite a few.
Yes.
Which, you know, in the space of bridal, people have used for wedding ceremonies as well as for, you know, the honeymoon location,
yes.
etc. So that's, I love it. I'm so glad you remembered that.
But Harriet, dare I say how many years it is?
Oh, we were babies.
We were babies. Okay.
We were babies.
I will tell you one thing. I've had my own store. It'll be 25 years in January of this coming year. And I met you years before that.
That's it. That's it. Well, aren't we lucky?
We're very lucky.
So what got you interested in bridal?
You know, I've been asked that question for so much of my career. It truly boils down to two things. My sister's wedding in 1994. We are very opposite siblings. You know, I'm like my mother. I'm very creative, gregarious. I love fashion, flair, style. My sister's more like my dad, cerebral, serious, quiet, and not so much into style and fashion. She's the only girl in the family of two children. When she got engaged in 1994 and proclaimed she was not having a wedding, my parents were not having it. Not having it. She says, well, okay, then you want a wedding? You do it. So we kicked into full gear. My mom and I kicked into full gear. The wedding was April 16th, 1994. And probably we had a little shorter lead time than normal because we didn't know we were going to have a big wedding. And it wound up being a big church wedding with a gorgeous reception at Tavern on the Green, full
Wow.
wedding gown, bridesmaid, the whole thing, best men, ushers. And I'd been in the fashion industry for about 14 years at that point anyway, not in bridal, but I was just coming out of Bonwitz and Bergdorf Goodman history and had spent a few years in wholesale, but not in bridal, in sportswear, basically. And so with this wedding, I was working in the garment center. I had access to so many things at my fingertips. My sister just gave me carte blanche. So from the dress, from the head to the toe, I styled her with her wedding dress. I made her veil. I hand beaded her shoes. With my mother, we worked on every detail of this wedding, from the dinner, the silverware, the tabletop, the flowers, the music, the venue, and I just loved it. I had no idea about anything in the industry before that because we'd had weddings in my family, but I was never a part of it that close to it. Nor had we had weddings sort of that level. And so when it all was said and done, I said, wow, this is kind of a cool industry. Because until you're in it or have a wedding in your family, you don't know about it.
That's true.
You don't know how big the industry is. It's $1 billion industry. So that got my start. I've got my foot wet, my toe wet, loved it. And then like a year and a half later, a dear friend of mine who worked at Amsala said I should apply for a job there because she was looking for a director of sales. And I got the position. It took 6 months of interviewing, but I got the job because I had no bridal experience except for the wedding. And I got the job, and the rest is history.
That is such a good story. That also, thank goodness your sister was okay with you coming in.
She's still okay with it. I still dress
doing
her.
everything.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So what were you doing in fashion as you were working at Bonwit and Bergdorf? What was your role?
At Bonwit Teller, I will tell you, I was probably one of the first assistant buyers they'd hired in a training program. I think I was the second class. I was started there in June of 1980, an executive training program to be a merchant, to be a buyer or something in the store. Coming fresh out of NYU, I studied business at NYU. I wanted to go to FIT. My parents dissuaded me at that time. It was only a 2-year school. It wasn't accredited. It was associate degree only. My parents said, as a Black man coming up in this world, you better get your butt in education.
Right.
And because education was firmly established in my family, from my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, I had to go to a 4-year college. I went to NYU, thrived there. I loved it. And when I graduated, I was recruited by IBM and all these wonderful Fortune 500 companies, but my heart was in fashion. It really was in fact, we didn't know what it was going to be, but I was very artistic, musical. I went to music and art high school in Harlem, very creative young man. And when they recruited me at Bonwitz, I thought, well, I love the store. It was so classy and elegant. Yeah. It was a Fifth Avenue store then. It subsequently closed shortly thereafter. At least the main store closed to build Trump Tower, of all things, in 1979. But I began there as an assistant buyer. And then I left 2 years later and went to Bergdorf Goodman as probably one of the first merchandising executives in that store's history in 1982 in the couture department of better apparel with vendors like Chanel, Givenchy, Saint Laurent. It was an amazing experience for this young person to experience that.
So I didn't know any of this. This is outstanding and sort of defying a lot of the barriers that we at least think exist. And not only do we think they exist, they do exist.
They do exist,
in business and in fashion for a young Black man to have this opportunity. And really for anybody. We're going to start with anybody because these are very exclusive stores. Bonwit Teller was a very exclusive store, and Bergdorf, as we know, was and is
the pinnacle.
And for you early on to be selling Chanel?
I wasn't selling it. I was buying it.
You were buying it.
Yeah, I was an associate buyer.
Even more.
Yes, I wasn't selling it. No, I was in the executive offices.
You're buying it. So
I was the assistant buyer to Chanel and associate buyer for coats and suits. Yeah, I was at Bergdorf Goodman's in the buying office on the 4th floor, better apparel division, under a wonderful woman named Mrs. Coombe. Dawn Mello was our fashion director. Iman Niemark was our president. And then Dawn Mello subsequently became the president. And I was there for the building of the escalators. That's how old I was. How old this story is. There were no escalators when I joined Bergdorf Goodman. Is not the store that we know it is today. It was beautiful, but it wasn't as meticulously styled like it is today.
And just for a moment, because she was legendary, Dawn Mello certainly had such an incredible impact on the fashion industry. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
She was formidable. She first as fashion director, first of all, she was so stately. She was so tall, elegant, quiet. I think on the shy side, which was perceived as being a very aloof and standoffish. I, of course, didn't get to really know her, interface with her directly as much as I'd like to. Of course, being a Black man in the store, in executive offices, she knew who I was, obviously, and was always very kind and courteous to me. They did in those days walks around the floor. So she and Ira Neimark would walk the floor every day to make sure that everything was meticulous. Different time in retailing. Yeah. Our buying office was on the floor where we actually sold the merchandise, bought and sold. We had beautiful old ladies who were selling these dresses, who'd been with the store for 20 and 30 and 40 years, who had an incredible book, who knew their customers. We went buying trips. We actually were buying for specific customers sometimes because we had a built-in clientele. So Mrs. So-and-so was a 2, Mrs. So-and-so was a 12. When you went to market to Givenchy or whatever in those days, you were thinking about who you were buying for in those, because you had a guaranteed sale. It was incredible. And we're not computerized either. We used to count stubs at night.
Wow. So you're going to Europe to buy, is that right?
No, I was an American counterpart. I didn't go to Europe. Okay. My boss went to Europe. Okay. I did the domestic market at 7th Avenue.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is just an amazing story. I didn't know this story about you, but just being on the inside at that level at Bergdorf, you get to interface with some of the wealthiest people in the world. And there's an intimacy about working with people as it relates to what they're wearing and you being able to have the vision to buy for them. Yeah. So how did you cultivate that eye?
Harriette, I was very fortunate in my upbringing that I can count back 3 generations of sort of style making in my family. It probably goes beyond that, but I go back to my great-grandparents on my father's side, the Ingrams. They were I'll call them a very middle-class family who thrived in the South at the turn of the century in Gainesville. How it all happened, I don't know, but they managed to have a beautiful 2-story home, which was rare. They raised 3 beautiful children, all went to school, they had jobs, and this was at a time when Black people really suffered greatly in the South. My grandfather had a very middle-class upbringing, and with that came a little luxury, of a little bit of travel, of style, having an eye, having parents who had some style, a beautiful home life that involved china and crystal and entertaining. In fact, I have old newspaper articles. In those days, when you entertained at home, or you had guests visiting from out of town, you had it printed in the society column, who came to see you. So I have, like, from the 1930s, a little printouts of what was served at a dinner party of my great-grandmom's Ida's house for a dinner party she had in honor of my great-grandfather's birthday, for example. So they lived a very classy life.
I love that. So you grew up in it. You were
I grew up in it. Yeah. And my mother's side, the same way. They were land gentry. They owned land in South Carolina, outside of Charleston. Don't know how it happened, but they accumulated acres and acres of property, which we still own, coming out of slavery. And they were a solid middle-class Black family that was entrepreneurs. They owned businesses, and they thrived in the South. And so I had no reason not to fail. I had upbringing from both sides of parents pushing me and my sister and grandparents and great-grandparents to push you, upwards and in the right direction. So I was very, very fortunate. I had no option to fail. I really didn't.
Well,
the taste level comes from my mother and my father, especially my mother. My mother was a style maker. I grew up in a beautiful home with beautiful art in my home, beautiful clothes, her lovely friends. She was a lovely person, very elegant, sophisticated, educated. Both my parents were. So I was exposed to that at an early age. So I had the love of it. And I, glommed onto it. I soaked it in because I loved it so much.
That's something. I mean, there's so many elements in that. I know that, like, the mantra that I remember from my father is excellence is the only option.
That's it.
And so, that's how you had to live at all times. And
that's right. Like present yourself.
Yes, you
I mean,
carry yourself in a certain way. You're representing your family, you're representing your community,
you're
and
representing your race at
you're
that time.
representing your race.
Your
Absolutely.
race, yes.
And that meant something and means something, even
Yeah.
though I don't know that people say it as much as they used to, but it certainly does mean, you have to be upstanding. You need to you need to know that you are bigger than yourself, that
Yes, it's
you're
true.
part of this community that matters, and we have to make sure it matters. Hey
Yeah.
guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole. We are talking to Mark Ingram. We are going down memory lane, getting a history lesson right now, and I love this so much. So, Mark,
Thank you.
in your atelier, there are
Yes.
these wonderful photos of your family, and you have
Yes.
talked to me about them before, but now hearing all that you're saying, it just brings them to life even more. Clearly, family was pivotal to you. That was the
Huge.
foundation of who you are today. You bring your family right into your business. Talk about that.
Yes. Well, from day one, I credit my parents for the upbringing that I had. I'm so grateful and proud. And, they instilled in me a confidence, a dedication, uh, a sense of purpose to go forward and achieve and be a credit to my race, a credit to my family. And so, like we said earlier, I had no chance to fail. But I honor them because I had the visual record also. One thing is to be told the stories. We're great storytellers. Black culture, the griot, we talk about
Sure.
oral history. That's a huge part of my life, as well as I'm sure it was yours as well.
Yes.
But I also had it backed up with photographic history. In my family, for some reason, beginning at the turn of the century, we sat for portraits. We took formal portraits. People had cameras, people had cars in my family. So we were able to be very mobile. My family was driving around the 1920s and 30s around the USA, probably looking at that green book as to where they could stay, taking photographs. My grandparents in New York City were super stylish. They'd come from the South, from Florida and Georgia and Charleston to New York City in the 20s, in the teens, the 20s, and the 30s. So style and how you present yourself was everything. Because if you were treated less than by the general public, at least you presented yourself as with certain pride. That demanded respect. And I think
Sure.
that's what kind of trickled down was you demand respect by how you present yourself. Bottom line. All these portraits of my family are like a legacy of what I had to live up to. Beautiful people, well-groomed people, smart people, proud people. And so on my wall, and they were also fashionable. I mean, on top of
Yes.
all that, they love clothes, fine tailoring. When I was a kid, Harriet, stores like Bonwit Taylor and Burgess Goodman, I was a regular shopper in those stores with my grandparents. So even as early as a stroller, taking me down, they babysat me every weekend. My parents were so lucky to have built-in babysitters. I was the first and only grandchild for a long time. I came along in my grandparents' life when they had the time and the resources to really treat me like a little prince, and they did. And shopping on Saturdays down Fifth Avenue was de rigueur. I mean, we were at Saks Fifth Avenue. I had a fitter at B. Altman Department Store on 34th.
You
It was
did.
Mrs. Gower was my fitter because I had clothes made for me at Best and Company and Altman's. Those are
At
the two
what
stores.
age, Mark?
Oh, I was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is all in the 60s. I was born in 1958. So starting about 1962, 63, I've got photographs of me in these little fabulous outfits. I always wore tweeds in the winter. I wore Chesterfield coats and tweed jackets and leather leggings and caps, matching caps, camel hair coats. That's where I grew up because
I
that was
love
the
it.
style then too. There wasn't a lot of funky fashion. It was about traditional clothing. So having exposure to these luxury retail stores as early as my first recollections, I understood what style was and what a retail environment could be like. That was elegant. That's all I knew was an elegant retail environment where you were waited on properly, treated well, got quality clothing, had a great experience.
So when you ended up working at that Bonwit Taylor, it was just like a continuation of the
Yeah.
experience.
It was, it was. Look, I had many summer jobs before that, all through school, working at like lesser places like Gimbel's and you don't even know his names, Gimbel's and Alexander's and EJ Corvette. I cut my teeth in retailing. I'm not a snob. I did it all. But when it came to working a career, I wanted a career in a store that was more aligned with my own personal lifestyle and taste level. I mean, Bergdorf Goodman was far reaching, but certainly I could fit in visually. You know, when I walked in
Yeah.
the door, I dressed sharp every day in a suit and tie.
So I have to ask, because you're talking about your growing up time is you were very young, but the civil rights movement is
Civil rights,
happening.
yes.
The
Pre-civil rights, I remember. Yeah,
and Black Power movement is happening.
yes,
Because you're entrenched with, the style of your parents and grandparents. It is, you have a more classic old school style than some of that revolutionary style
yes.
that happened at that time. But just even beyond style, like, it was hard for Black people to shop on Fifth Avenue,
It
to
was
even
really
think
hard.
you
It
could,
was really hard.
even think you could do this. Did you ever personally see racism? Did you ever have the experience of somebody really pushing back, like, no, Mark, you can't, you're not welcome?
You know, it would be more as the years after that. But in the beginning, I think it was all about how you presented yourself.
Mm-hmm.
People are not afraid of you if you're like them. Bottom line. And it comes down to economics. If you got money to spend and you behave yourself in a store like Bergdorf Goodman, they want your dollars, baby. So we'd be the only Black family shopping there. My grandmother, my grandfather, myself. But it didn't matter because they held themselves so beautifully. They had the money to spend. They knew quality. So it was natural. So I never grew up with like a fear of not belonging because I was always told that I did belong. I was told I belonged. And no one treated me differently. So yeah, there were always subtle things that happen in your life. I recall a story recently. It's a little tragic, but I grew up in a very integrated neighborhood in the Northeast Bronx. And I remember that certain friends of mine who went to the sort of Miami or Florida for the Christmas break.
Sure.
I'm talking about the 1960s now. I'd get postcards from my friend Marco. Hi, I'm having a great time at the Hotel Algiers, on Miami Beach. Wish you were here, kind of thing. We're like, 7, 8, 9 years old. And I never really asked my mother anything, but I realized now, being a resident of Florida, Miami Beach, right now, because I did it purposely, I wasn't even allowed to be on Miami Beach past sundown in 1965.
Yeah.
How could I have even dreamed of going there on a vacation in those days? We were not welcome, not wanted,
Right.
My parents shielded me from all of that. I had no
So
idea.
that was
We just did our thing.
so your way of, you didn't know because they didn't show it to you.
They didn't show it to me.
And
I
being
probably
from
learned more.
New York,
I
being
probably
from
learned
New
more on
York, yeah.
TV about it than I did, what was happening in the world than I did in my reality, because my parents created a beautiful nest for us, of my sister and I to grow up in. Very lucky.
It's so interesting. I'll share a short story with you. So I'm from Baltimore.
Yes.
Very similar kind of upbringing with my parents, not so much my grandparents, but my father was a judge and my mother
Yes.
a kindergarten teacher. And there was a very large Black middle class in Baltimore.
Yes.
As I was growing up, and all the clubs and the parties and the black tie and
Yes.
all of that. But when I was, whatever age I was very young, 7 or 8, when Martin Luther King, even younger, when Martin Luther King was murdered.
Yes.
And
68. Never
right.
forget it.
And my father had just become a judge. And my father was a tall, dark-skinned man. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, was a tiny, white-skinned woman.
Yes.
And they were both out at work. My grandmother was a domestic worker. My father was a judge, but he was on the criminal court. And so
wow. That's impressive.
And so it was. And, he became a judge in the early 60s. And I, as a little girl, heard that this had occurred. And I remember pacing the floor until both of them got to our house, because I thought in my little girl's brain at 7, I guess, that my father was going to be killed because he put Black people in jail and people were mad. Dr. King got killed. Yeah. Like, he's not safe. Right. I thought my grandmother was going to get killed because she looked like a white woman and she was coming through these white neighborhoods into Black neighborhoods to our neighborhood. And people might look at her and be mad because Martin Luther King had been killed. Remember, this is a little girl's brain.
Crazy.
But I remember it was my first time having any sense of racism and any sense of fear around race because, like you, my
Yeah.
parents had shielded us. My father was a judge. He knew what it was like, so he just
Yeah.
didn't show us anything. We
Yes.
couldn't go to any of the places that were possibly unsafe.
Right.
And that took the mask off in a way, that
Yes.
Dr. King was assassinated, changed everything.
Everything changed everything. And America was so angry then too. We were angry starting from 60, well, always angry, but and for rightful cause to be, but we were really riled up by the late 60s and 70s with the Black Power movement, the Black Panthers. A lot was going on. The looting, I remember some of the riots in Harlem, during the blackout of 65. It was some bad times in the Northeast, especially Detroit, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia. These cities really suffered, set the Black community back, generations, really.
Yeah. But at the same time that happened, there was thriving. And what you're describing is thriving, and also a level of comfort that you had that allowed you to just navigate wherever you wanted, to be where you wanted, and to believe that you could do whatever you wanted, which is, that belief is something that I think, at least our generation, the parents made you believe you could do anything.
Yes.
I think even today, I have a daughter who's 21, and she's
a beautiful daughter.
She's in her last year of college, and I believe she thinks she can do anything.
Yes.
And in both instances, very different generations, even though there's that belief, all this other stuff is going on.
Right.
Which is pretty amazing.
It's pretty amazing.
It's easy.
I'm thinking back to a specific time in 1968, for example. My mother's best friend, Hazel Layton, was the assistant to a very important man named Fred Friendly. If you look at that, there was a show on Broadway. Was it Good Luck and Good Night? Good Night and Good Luck with George Clooney? It's all about Edward R. Murrow and Fred Friendly. Hazel was the assistant to both of them at CBS in those days. Hazel was a Black woman, by the way.
Okay.
And they named Hurricane Hazel after her. That was the first major hurricane in 1954 that they named. She's named for them. But anyway, she's like my godmother. She moved to the Ford Foundation in the 60s, working for Fred Friendly. And that building was a very formidable, gorgeous building on 42nd and First Avenue by the UN. And I would periodically, if I was going downtown as a 10-year-old boy, which you could do in those days on the subway, if New York was safe, I would, be all dressed up and stop by the Ford, walk in the Ford Foundation building and go visit Hazel at her office, at her Fred Friendly office. And, I had no fear of anything, of going any place. I really didn't. And this was my life story is I remain fearless now because of these things, of having this strength of whatever it was, a strength that was given to me in my upbringing. This is such important for young people to hear this, when you're choosing your partner in life, how you raise your children. It's about moving the generation, moving the family forward, moving the bloodline forward, doing things that are positive and moving yourself in a forward way, not down, not backwards, but forward and upward, always.
Yeah, agreed. And my grandmother used to always say, "Keep good company." Who are you surrounding yourself with? Who's part of your world? As it relates to you and business, the pivot when you got to bridal was Amsala, right? That was So Amsala, for those who don't know, is this amazing Ethiopian, right? Ethiopian woman who had a vision for a business. And to my knowledge, she's the first Black woman to have an atelier on Madison Avenue.
Yes.
Isn't that right?
I'm going to say something. Remember, there was Anne Lowe who designed Jackie Bouvier Kennedy's dress, supposedly had a business on either Park Avenue or Madison Avenue way back in the 30s or 40s or 50s. And worked. I didn't realize that she had
an atelier there. So wait, all praises to Anne Lowe.
All praises to Anne Lowe, the Black goddess of bridal, because she created one of the most iconic wedding dresses in history of the world. Jackie Kennedy's dress.
And by the way, a lot of people didn't know that she was a Black woman. This revelation came many years later and has been
Many.
celebrated significantly in
Yes.
recent years. But
Yes.
she very quietly was designing clothes for many of society's ladies.
Yes.
And that dress, designing that dress, because Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy was such a fashion icon.
My mother emulated her in the 50s and
I
the
mean,
60s.
so that she would hire Ann Lowe to make her dress meant a lot. It's not like every first lady you care, but you certainly cared about
that
her.
family. The
That
Kennedys were a very
family.
powerful family. We're talking about the 50s now, before he became president, but they were a very important
Exactly.
political family.
Exactly. Hey guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole. We are here talking with Mark Ingram of Mark Ingram Atelier. He is a bridal designer with a bridal shop that carries his clothes as well as many others.
Yes.
And yes, he's on Madison Avenue in New York City, which I just love being able to say that.
Thank you.
So, Mark,
but to digress from Sala, yes, she is the first modern Black designer, female, to have an atelier on Madison Avenue for bridal. And believe me, that was not lost on me working for her. To cut my teeth in bridal with her.
This was huge. So I wrote a book that I'm remaking right now, Jumping the Broom, the African American Wedding Planner. I made this book in 1993. That was when it first came out. And Sala was huge at this time.
Huge.
And her dress is on the cover of my original book.
Yes.
And I just remember I was fashion editor at Essence at the time, and that's how we covered bridal. That's how I even came to make this book. And I remember going to her atelier and being so proud that this amazing, beautiful African woman was in the game.
In the game.
As a designer. The fact that she was a woman, the fact that she was African, that she was Black, those things were facts. But yes. She was a stellar designer, and tragically she passed away. But what is brilliant too, because I've talked to her husband about this, when she learned that she was ill, she had a strategy. She set that business up so that it would continue, and it is thriving today. That is so rare. That is so rare. And I'm happy to know that it's true.
Yes. Harriet, I sat next to her every day for 4 years. Every day. And boy, did I learn so much about running a business, about design. I was in sales, not design, but we sat literally next to each other, like chair by chair to chair. And, I learned so much from her and her husband, Neil. It was an incredible experience for me. So proud to work for them. And she was at the top of her game. I must tell you that in those years, I would go out to do a selling event, and the numbers of dresses we sold, I mean, she was a household bridal name in the 90s. Household bridal name in the 90s. That was rare.
Actually, for people who may not know, because this industry is a very tiny industry, many of you have heard of Vera Wang.
Yes.
So she was in competition, right?
In direct competition.
Direct competition with Vera Wang.
Yeah.
Which means a lot. And Vera, I think, just sold her business for $800 million. Like, wow.
The only competition I had when I went out to do a store selling event would be Vera Wang and a new up and coming designer at the time named Reem Akra, because Reem Akra brought beading back to bridal, whereas we were in a very clean, austere period of lace and satin and fine handwork, but not so much beading. Sorry, it wasn't much about beading. She did a lot of lace.
Yes.
And Reem Akra introduced this elaborate sort of Middle Eastern inspired embroidery into bridal, and that changed the game for everybody.
Yeah, they did.
In those days.
Yeah. And so 4 years you worked with Sala, and then it was time for you to make a switch. That had to be a challenge to even think of. You're in this place, it's a thriving business.
It's thriving, yeah.
And you decide to go. What happened to make you do that?
I worked a lot. I was director of sales, wholesale sales, which meant that I had to manage an entire country of selling on the wholesale side, not retail. Madison Avenue was a little bit under my jurisdiction in terms of evening wear, but not really. That was run by another division, but I was wholesale. Her account base in the United States was vast, probably still so. And so my job was to go out on the weekends and do trunk shows at all these. I had major accounts. I had Kleinfeld in New York. Saks at that time had about 6 doors I went to visit twice or 3 times a year. Beverly Hills, Orange County, Miami, Atlanta. I went to stores in Texas, Seattle, Chicago. I was traveling every weekend for these trunk show events, plus organizing and hosting Bridal Fashion Week twice a year, which used to be held in her apartment on the 11th floor, if you remember, in her gorgeous apartment in the Garment Center, like a loft apartment. So it was a question of, after 4 years of a work-life balance for me. That's really all it was. And when I was offered a job to become a buyer and work in a retail situation in bridal in Manhattan and work 5 days a week with 2 days off together, boy, that was a treat. I hadn't had that.
2 days off together was a luxury.
I hadn't had that in like 20 years. So
wow.
So I jumped at it, and I became, for a full year, a buyer and manager of a bridal salon, a very elite bridal salon called Workstat down in Soho on the corner of Grand and Green Street. And it was a beautiful, artsy, modern atelier. And they had hired me to bring in other designers and make it a multi-vendor situation. So I brought in, at the time, young talents, Ravini, Ann Barge, Monique Lullier, Angel Sanchez. Those are the people that I brought into the door with Workstat.
And so that's 1 year. And
Yes.
then what happened?
9/11 happened. Well, just before that, the owners of Workstat were they literally owned the building on the corner of Grand and Green. It's a beautiful retail space.
Yeah.
10 windows, I'll never forget. It was a condo or co-op building. They owned the space outright. Soho was going through a tremendous change right then and there. The owners kept getting these amazing offers on their property to sell it to, or lease it to somebody else. So they caved, because they could make so much more money with the real estate than running their own operation. So they decided to close the retail store, move it temporarily into the garment center, but they did encourage me to open my own store and gave me the ammunition to do so by giving me all the inventory from that store to start my business.
Fantastic.
Yes. So they gave me all the inventory from that store to be the base of my starting. I signed my lease September 25th, 2001. 2 weeks exactly after 9/11. I was a walking zombie. If you remember that time, it was not a good time.
That's amazing that you even had the awareness to be able to do that, because we were like unconscious, it felt like.
Unconscious.
Yeah.
But I started the process that summer, July, by looking at real estate. The wheel was rolling. I was interviewing people, writing purchase orders for the new store. I had to go to October Market to write orders for my new store and, to open with. So I was walking like a zombie, but I opened the store in January 2nd, 2002 with great inventory that I'd gotten from the Workstat store, but also tremendous support from the industry. I was literally throwing designers out of my store. People wanted to be in my store, and I had never owned a store before. So I had to build a reputation at Amsala for being someone of note in the industry. And then the year in Workstat, becoming a buyer and manager for a store, gave me that little extra zhuzh that I needed in my career. And when I announced I was going to open a store, I was flooded with requests to be part of that, because there wasn't that many freestanding, shall we say, privately owned multi-vendor bridal salons being opened in Midtown New York City, East Side. Right. There was Kleinfeld in Brooklyn at the time. Right. There was Saks Fifth Avenue, Bergdorf Goodman, maybe one or two, maybe Bridal Reflections. I forget the names of the stores. But I had set my mind out, again, back to the first part of this conversation, given my taste level of what I felt comfortable in, given how I was raised and grown and, put out there in the world, I was going to do things the way I wanted to do them. And that meant elevated. So elevated design talent, elevated location, elevated sales team, elevated experience. You know, if I'm going to do it, and go out on my own as a black man in Upper East Side to open a bridal salon, you know, it had to be fierce. It had to be. So
Indeed. And so this was in 2001.
started the process 2001, opened January 2nd, 2002. 9/11 had happened just 3 months before my opening. Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
And so, but the thing is, people still get married. You know, there are lots of things that don't happen, but people still get married.
But we didn't know that at the time. We thought the world had ended. I couldn't reverse my process because I had signed my lease. I was in it. I put my money down. I was all in. And I just thought, what did I do? My parents were my only investors. Thank God I only had my parents were my investors, and I had my own personal money to invest. So if we were going to lose, it would not be as catastrophic as maybe had I had to answer to investors. Right. But with that said, I still had a lot of responsibility, and a lot of pressure on me to perform and do well. And I thought no one's going to get married anymore because the world is over, right? It was a terrible time. Massive recession happened, but people wanted to commit to each other, and that's what happened.
That's beautiful.
So our first years were gangbuster years.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, I was very lucky, very, very lucky. But I also hired a great team. And I also learned from the best. I've had so many great mentors in my life. I've been working at that point since 1980. This is 2002. So 22 years of fantastic mentors, both at the retail level, with Dawn Mello, Ira Niemark, Corinne Kuhn, my boss, Mary Lewis at Bergdorf Goodman, Chris Birch, the famous Chris Birch was my mentor. I worked for him for 10 years in the Garment Center. I had great people in my life who were great business minds and entrepreneurs, and plus the entrepreneurial background of my own bloodline from my mother's family.
Right.
So that gave me the strength to move forward and do things in a certain way that I thought was the right way. I thought it was the right way at the time.
And so what would you say are some of the early highlights when you opened your atelier? You know, you've got this amazing start, but also, like we keep talking about, there's this wonderful stuff happening, but 9/11 just happened. And honestly, some businesses never recovered.
They didn't recover.
Even now to this day. So
like COVID, it was just as bad effect as like COVID had on the world.
Exactly.
Too. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and so you had that, and then you also had COVID. So, but like in the early years, what would you say some of the highlights are of your business?
Well, in those first years, let me think what happened. The first thing I did that was very smart. In naming my business, I included my name in the business. It was called the Bridal Atelier by Mark Ingram, number one. So it identified me as a person in the industry. This is my marketing background at NYU, so I knew a little bit about business. Second thing I did was hire a publicist who was amazing and worked for me full time at the time. So I was constantly being asked to appear on, say, news shows, local news shows, national news shows. I was a regular on E! And the Entertainment Network and Extra and all these shows to report on bridal trends. I also began to use my own image in my advertising because I was a multi-vendor store. I would often sometimes, use pictures of designers' dresses to represent my store, but mostly I had a portrait taken, again, back to the portraits now, of myself by several beautiful photographers, like Christian Oss, for example, did my amazing portrait, my first portraits. And I used my image in my ads in magazines like Martha Stewart, Town and Country, Brides Magazine. These were national magazines. So even though I was a local retailer, I presented myself on a national level. And then actually international level, because everybody read those magazines in those times. Those are the days of print magazines.
Right.
So Town and Country, In Style magazine.
Heyday of print magazines.
Heyday of print, because you were in it.
Yes.
Yes.
And so I love that you use your business training to help set up your business and make you known, because it's hard to be known in this world. And for you to put yourself out there too is a credit to you being confident that it will be okay to put yourself out there. Some people do the opposite. You're never going to know who I am. And then you don't know that I'm a Black man. but you did it the other way. Here I am, here's who I am, and here's what I'm doing.
Yes.
And it paid off. It paid off for you, which is fantastic. But you mentioned COVID, and that
Yes.
of course is many years later. But I'm curious because when we have these dips and fall, well, let me give a little context because we had 9/11, we have 2008.
Oh my God.
We have these dips. So wait,
Huge
because we only have a
dips.
few minutes left. Let me just remind folks, this is Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole. We could talk for hours to Mark Ingram. We are talking to Mark Ingram of Mark Ingram Couture, really about how he's built this beautiful bridal business. So Mark, we don't have much time left, but I want you to talk about those dips and falls, like 2008, COVID. I'm sure there were others in between, but when the economy kind of goes
Up and down. Yeah.
What
Every time a new
happens to a
president
bridal
comes into
business?
the White House, Harriet, every time there's a new regime in the White House, business changes,
Right.
People get nervous. I was very, I'd say my strategy was to appeal to an upper echelon clientele who was less impervious to these dips in the economy or crises because they continue to celebrate the joining of two families. America is as I know, has become a designer now, I realize because I do sell internationally, but United States, I'd say Latin America, small pockets of Europe, the Middle East and Asia do celebrate weddings, but a lot of the world does not celebrate weddings like we used to any longer.
Oh.
So I cater to those pockets who celebrate weddings in a major way. And that means obviously having bigger budgets and spending on flowers, music, design, location, venue, dress. I positioned myself to be in the upper ends of bridal. Again, that's all I knew coming out of Amsala,
Right.
competing against Vera Wang and Rimakra and Monique Lullier, competing with these vendors at a time when I was in wholesale. That's all I knew. It's all I knew how to be in. It's all I knew how to buy for. I was also a buyer. Remember that I was buying merchandise for my store before I was designing it. And so my taste level sort of predicated where I needed to be in the market. It was no brainer for me. And those people can withstand a little more, fortunately, unfortunately, can withstand a little more of the dips in the economy. Mm-hmm. Business always changes. It was not so strong during those periods, but I could sustain.
And so let's talk about who's getting married, because as over time, it has changed. My research shows that people are more mature now. They're getting married older.
Yes.
Having way left home and establishing their own lives and careers and bank accounts.
Yes.
Are you finding that?
Oh, yes. I think my average age has been for many years, 29, 30 for a bride, 31. Okay. They are often established in their career, finished with their education, oftentimes still in medical school or law school. They're, passing bars at that time of their wedding. They are doing residencies, they're studying for certain exams. A lot of they're all professional women, whether they're architects, whether in fashion, design, architecture, law, education, politics. I've been very fortunate to have a combination of brides, a cacophony of brides who are very well, say, educated.
Right.
Because they've had privileged lives, a lot of them, or some of them are self-made as well. Because these weddings we're talking about are big budget weddings, not just for the dress. I'm the least of their worries, in terms of the budget.
What does an average wedding that you're part of cost these days, do you think?
Harriet, when I first started, the dress was supposed to be 10% of the bridal budget. So you do the math. My average retail in my store is $8,000 to $12,000 on a daily basis. We go a little below, and we definitely go higher than that. But if $10,000 is the average, that's $100,000 right there. But I believe that doesn't scratch the surface of what these weddings are.
Right. A $100,000 wedding today is like a budget.
It's a budget or a budget for flowers. Seriously, it's crazy. In my realm, I think the weddings that I do start at $500,000 to $1 million. I think that's kind of my bride. I got to tell you, it's scary to say. Amazing. That's it.
Just to think about, as we think about the economy and what people are experiencing, and there's quite a breadth in terms of who is in this space. But so what's the future for Mark Ingram? What are you doing now?
Well, I've been designing under my own label. It'll be, well, 8 years for my store, 5 years as a wholesale brand to many stores. I'm in about 17 stores in the United States. I'm
Great.
in 6 stores in Italy, 1 store in Qatar. I'm so excited about. I'm in Japan in about 6 stores and about 3 or 4 doors in Korea. So the business has grown tremendously. So there's hopefully more growth in that area for me. I love my design work. I'm a senior citizen officially and have been for several years.
I love it.
Since we talked about when I got my start, back in the 60s on Fifth Avenue, being a toddler. So I think as long as I can have my health and my mind, I can continue to do these things for the rest of my life. My atelier runs on its own. I've got the best team. Although I'm there a lot, I've curated the best team of salespeople, managers, merchants, public relations. My CEO is brilliant. And so we're very sound financially, and that was very important to me to have a very financially sound business. You have to be in bridal very sound because it involves a lot of money involved in coming and going. Cash flow is critical of managing that aspect of your business. My business is very sound, thank God. And so I can probably continue for a very, very long time. I have a home in Miami that I love, so I get to go. I live in Riverdale in the Bronx, and I live in Miami. I go back and forth. I've got a wonderful partner who has a home in the Hamptons, so we get to go out there and do that. And
You have a
life
great
is
life.
good. Life is good, Harriet. I'm blessed. I'm so thankful and grateful to, God Almighty, and also my parents and family for the background they instilled in me and the genes, the blood I got.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's been inspiring to talk to you. Thank you, Mark Ingram.
What a pleasure. Thank you, Harriet. Good luck on your book. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you.
Okay, all the best. Thanks.
And thank you to all of you for tuning in. I hope that you had as much fun as I did learning from Mark Ingram. His whole family story is so brilliant. Check him out, Mark Ingram Atelier. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.
Bye-bye.